Both candidates claiming they'll cut regulations and get costs down, but whose plan will actually work for the American people. Joining me now, former White House Council of Economic Advisors Chairman Kevin Hassett and the Peebles Corporation Chairman and CEO and former Obama fundraiser Don Peebles. Gentlemen, it's great to see you both. And Kevin, I want to start with you and those comments coming from the former president at the Economic Club here in New York. He said things that to investors would be music to their ears: cutting regulation, getting rid of the EV mandate, maybe taking the corporate tax rate down to 15%. It's a 21% if that company operates in the United States. These policies, if implemented, would bring back the economy. Your reaction?
Right. Well, one of the things that's actually a benefit of President Trump sticking with the same values, the same things that he used the first time, is that we have a whole bunch of evidence about how that stuff worked the first time. And so by cutting the corporate tax and deregulating and having a more reciprocal trade policy, we had 3% growth, 1% inflation, real incomes grew by about $6,000 per family, lots of really good news. And so I think that President Trump had a very positive agenda that I think will have a big positive effect on the economy, just because that's what it did last time. And in fact, those who argue that this is going to somehow be stagflationary or something, which you see that was a report from Goldman Sachs, then they have to explain to me why it is that policies that worked so well last time aren't going to work this time. And if you start to dig down into what they're saying, that it's basically just partisan claptrap.
Well, now we get more numbers. And Don, we've also gotten this housing plan in particular from Kamala Harris, because obviously it is nice to hear her talk about the housing market and to get more building, more supply on the market. But what did you make of her plan?
Well, I think the plan is going to have the opposite effect of what they're hoping for. It would actually drive up prices of homes. I think that housing policy belongs at the local level because each market has a different dynamic. So some markets will need incentives for first-time buyers. Some markets will need support for down payments. Some markets will need a stimulus to help reduce the cost of housing. But you can't do it at the federal level, and that policy will just lead to increased prices. And $25,000 is not meaningful enough in the marketplace to make a difference on the positive side.
And I've heard that you offer $25,000, and then prices are going to go up by $25,000 because sellers know that added addendum is there for, the buyer. Let's talk about the jobs market, gentlemen. Thrust into the spotlight right before the election. We just got this latest report about jobs. It disappointed. We continue to see massive revisions in the jobs numbers. In August, it came in weaker than expected, only adding 142,000 jobs versus the estimated 160,000. Revisions were the big story. June and July showing 86,000 fewer jobs created than previously reported. So far this year, job gains have been revised lower by a total of 247,000. Adam Johnson says that bad employment numbers, high inflation will be negative for Kamala Harris's campaign. Here's what he told Maria on this show last week.
It absolutely matters for Kamala Harris. The reason being, there's this thing on Wall Street called the misery index, where you add inflation, CPI, plus the unemployment number. And if that goes above 7.3, historically since World War II, incumbents lose.
Rate sitting at 4.2% right now. How much of an impact do you think these numbers, Kevin, are going to have on the election?
Right. Well, I think that in some sense the Harris campaign will feel, after looking at last week's jobs numbers, that they probably dodged a bullet. Because I expected the number to be worse. I expected the unemployment rate to go up again. We're right at the precipice of the SOM rule area with the unemployment rate where people say, okay, we're in recession. A lot of people think the recession began in August, and we're expecting this number to show it. And so the fact that it came in a little below average, it'll be revised down, it wasn't a clear signal that we're in recession. And I think that that's absolutely politically salient, because if everybody were sure we were in a recession, then whoever's in the White House generally bears the electoral responsibility for that.
Well, yeah, that is the Biden-Harris administration. And 24,000 government jobs were added in August. More than 20% of the total jobs added over the last year have been government jobs. Now, former President Trump is vowing to create this commission that's focused on making the government more economically efficient, cracking down on waste and abuse, a full audit of the federal government, basically. And he wants to put Elon Musk in charge of it. Don, a business guy. Your reaction?
Well, I think business people belong in government. I think our founding fathers had that in mind, where people served in the government after serving and excelling in the private sector and then leaving and going back to their businesses. And unfortunately, we now have a culture of career politicians. I believe that the government is the most inefficient operation in this country if you look at it at the state, local, county levels and the federal levels. And so President Trump, by taking this kind of initiative, should he be elected, he'll get significant reward for doing that. The government in this country is very inefficient. If you look at it, even these numbers are indicative of an inefficient government. A big thing is that these people need to come back to work in their offices. And I think that we can then get an assessment as to how few employees we really need to run our government.
And, and Kevin, we're sitting on $35 trillion in debt right now. Some say that we're at crisis levels.
Right. Well, it could turn into a crisis, but it won't if government comes in that takes this responsibility seriously and starts reducing the deficit. And I don't really see that from the Harris administration. They've got a lot of proposals for crazy tax hikes that would never pass. I don't think even a Democratic Senate, and then a huge amount of spending. They haven't talked anything really about reducing spending. And so my guess is that what happens is that markets begin to lose faith in America's commitment to its own debt, to paying its debt back if Harris is elected, and it could lead to a serious financial crisis. But I think if President Trump comes in, I've spoken with him about the matter himself, that it's going to be much more fiscally responsible. There'll be a reconciliation bill next year that returns the trajectory of the budget towards balance over 10 years. And so I think that there's a big change coming in financial markets depending on this election.
Well, we shall see. Kevin Hassett, Don Peebles, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.